Another big story here, the man accused of fatally shooting the CEO of UnitedHealthcare outside of a hotel in Midtown Manhattan could be sentenced to death if convicted. Luigi Mangione was charged Thursday with federal counts of stalking and murder, making him eligible for the death penalty. Mangione is being held without bail after appearing in Manhattan federal courtroom hours after his court appearance over in Blair County, Pennsylvania, not too far from where he was arrested in Altoona. The 26-year-old waived extradition and was flown to New York, where Brian Thompson was fatally shot back on December 4th. In a New York State court indictment, the Manhattan District Attorney's Office charged Mangione with, quote, murder as an act of terrorism, which does carry a maximum penalty of life in prison. Mangione's lawyer said it's a, quote, highly unusual situation for a defendant to face simultaneously state and federal charges. Investigators allege when they took Mangione into custody at a McDonald's in Altoona, he had the gun used to kill Thompson, and they also say he had a spiral notebook that included handwritten pages expressing hostility toward the health insurance industry and against wealthy executives. I do want to discuss this all just a little bit further, so let's bring in David Schwartz, a New York trial attorney and former prosecutor. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us today.
Thank you.
Of course. Well, I do want to start talking about the death penalty situation. Now, we know that Mangione does face those federal charges now. So would the death penalty be on the table if not for those federal charges?
No, absolutely not. New York State does not have a death penalty, but there is a death penalty in the federal code. And therefore, on the federal case of murder by using a gun, it is death penalty eligible, although very unusual.
If Mangione is convicted, could he actually be sentenced to death? Is that a legitimate option? Who makes the call? I know that's kind of hard to tell right now as all of this is just developing and, you have a case-by-case basis situation. But what can you tell me?
Yes, so there are several phases to this. So first of all, the prosecutors make the call as to whether or not they're going to charge the death penalty. And that can be taken off the table at any time, even though it's on the table right now. And then if it is a death penalty case, it has to go through several phases. First, there's the guilt phase of the case. And then after the guilt phase, there's a second phase, the death penalty phase of the case. And that's when the jury decides whether or not the defendant will get the death penalty or life in prison without parole.
I do want to play this soundbite right here. This is a very short one that did come from the actual attorney for Mangione. Again, very brief.
We're going to respectfully decline to make any comment at this time, but Mr. Mangione appreciates everyone's support.
It sounds as though his attorney is pretty well known at this point, pretty high power. What do we know about her?
Well, she's an excellent attorney. He's being very well represented. She's known in the circles in New York and beyond. So he's going to get excellent representation. And then if he is facing the death penalty, he'll have another attorney in court, a special death penalty attorney who specializes in really bringing forth mitigating factors so the defendant would not get the death penalty. But this is all very unusual.
Right. And I do have to ask, because you heard her at the end of that very brief statement saying that Mangione does thank all the people out there for their support. So my question, does that factor in to any of this, how much support he is receiving from folks there in the public? We had people that were lined up yesterday outside of the courthouse wearing Luigi hats from the Mario Brothers. So does that factor in any way? And is that good for the defense?
Well, in a case like this, there's always the court of public opinion. So, of course, he's being couched in public opinion a certain way. And unfortunately, he does have these supporters that, support him, even though he committed a cold-blooded murder on camera. Certainly, there's a certain portion of this case that you're trying in the court of public opinion. You have to, as a defense attorney, you would like none of this to be in the court of public opinion. And really analyzed by a jury. But unfortunately, in this kind of case, the jury will be influenced by what they hear in the public, because you can't help but not hear about this case in the public domain.
I was going to say it's all over the news, all over everything. So it is
Yeah.
very hard to find people who haven't heard about the case overall. So cameras were not allowed in the courtroom for Mangione's preliminary hearing or the extradition hearing. What you're looking at is some of the photos, the sketches that were made by folks who were allowed in there. As a criminal defense attorney, a trial attorney there, and a former prosecutor, how do you feel about cameras being allowed in the courtroom that can broadcast a hearing or even a trial to the public so everyone out there can watch?
Right. I have mixed feelings about it. Certainly, you have to weigh the various factors of the public's interest in watching the case and our criminal justice system being shown to a large audience, a broad audience. And certainly that would favor cameras being in the courtroom. On the other hand, you have to weigh that against the defendant's right to a fair trial. And the question always becomes, are they getting a fair trial with the cameras in the courtroom? Are the attorneys performing for the cameras? Is the judge now going to perform for the cameras? You would like to think that the trial will be the same exact trial, whether or not the cameras are there or not. But the overwhelming concern is the concern for your client and their Sixth Amendment right to a fair trial. So you have to weigh that. And again, I have mixed feelings about it. I tend to favor cameras in the courtroom because I don't think a defense attorney will try their case any differently, whether or not there's a camera in the courtroom or not. And I'd like to think that a judge will perform the same exact way, whether or not there's a camera in the courtroom or not. But it's certainly a concern for the defense.
We did hear Mangione actually scream toward the camera, not yesterday. He was quiet then, but about a week or so ago, we heard from him. He made a very brief comment as he was escorted into either the jail or the courthouse. I would imagine criminal defense attorneys do not want their clients to be speaking to members of the media as all of this is unfolding.
Absolutely not. You want your client to remain silent throughout all the proceedings, including before the proceedings. That's where most of the damage is done. Those that know that they should, when they're being questioned by a government official, by a member of law enforcement, is to stay silent until you have a chance to have your attorney present. So that's what we always advise our clients. This can be used against him later on. And certainly you don't want one of those scenes where he's just screaming at the cameras, for sure.
My last question, what happens to those charges that he does have in Pennsylvania? Again, he was arrested in Altoona at a McDonald's there, and he was arrested on several charges. So now that he's over in New York facing state and federal charges there, what happens to the ones over in Pennsylvania? Do they just kind of disappear?
I believe they're going to disappear if he's convicted on a capital murder case, facing life in jail without parole, or possibly, as slim as it is, the death penalty. You're going to see those charges in Pennsylvania go away, but they're going to remain open for a period of time, and they could remain open in perpetuity, really. But I don't see him ever going back to Pennsylvania after the New York case to face those charges.
All right. David, thank you so much for taking the time to join us and help discuss this a little bit further. We appreciate your legal expertise. Is there anything else you want to add about any of this before I let you go?
Well, hopefully the defendant does have a fair trial, and hopefully all the evidence is brought in against. I think it's very important that the process, remain the way the process is intended, and that he gets a fair trial pursuant to the Sixth Amendment, and let the jury decide.
All right. Thank you again for being here with us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.